I generated this AI video on the topic of pressurized vessels, cranes, truck locks, and elevators, which are all things in a manufacturing facility require inspection. So I think it's an important topic, and the video itself is actually pretty good. However, it needs some further embellishment because this AI has never been around a human and it's never walked inside a giant factory like I have. Anyway, here we go.
You know that feeling, right? You can almost taste it in the air. People are double-checking files, getting records organized. Yep, an ISO audit is just around the corner.
Oh, by the way, haven't I ever told you don't try to cram for an ISO audit? Have a system where you keep track of stuff ongoing so that you don't have to scramble around the week before the audit.
And if you're in Georgia's industrial sector, you know that pressure. You think you've got all your bases covered, but what if the one thing you're laser focused on is the one thing the auditor might just glance right past? Let's talk about what they're really looking for. So,
It's more likely to be the audit. The auditor will see stuff that you don't see on a daily basis because, as we're going to talk about later, stuff fades into the background.
let's start with a simple question. Think about that boiler chugging away in the back of your facility. Is its inspection certificate current? Your first reaction is probably, of course it is, or maybe a sudden panic of, oh man, I better go check that right now. It feels like the most basic yes or no compliance question you can get. But here's the thing. For an ISO auditor, your answer is just the beginning of the conversation.
Yeah, boiler certificates are one of my favorite things to look at. First of all, it doesn't usually happen early in the audit. It usually happens late when we're exploring the back of the place or the basement of the place, because most of these things are in the back and in the basement, and they're all kind of nasty. And so your normal quality manager or even your safety manager doesn't get back there all the time. So it's pretty easy to walk back in there, inspect the inspection certificate, which in most states is required to be posted on the boiler, and then start the conversation on the basis of that.
And here's a statement that might shock you a little bit. An ISO auditor doesn't actually care if that certificate is expired. I know that sounds completely crazy, maybe even a little irresponsible.
Well, I care deeply about expired certificates, but I don't audit them. What I do is audit is conformity to the ISO standard or internal requirements or regulatory requirements that I need, come across during the time we're looking at stuff. So basically what I'm really interested in is conformity to the ISO standard, and I tell everybody that in the opening meeting.
But it's true, just not in the way you're probably thinking. See, the auditor's job isn't what most people assume it is, and getting your head around this difference is the absolute key to passing your next audit. And that gets us to the absolute core of this whole thing, the huge difference between a legal statute and a management system. You've got a state inspector, and their job is to enforce the law, the statute. But an ISO auditor, they're there to evaluate your process, your system. They are playing two totally different games with different rules and completely different goals.
Yeah, as I'm so fond of saying, and many of you have heard me say this, this isn't a safety audit, it is a following directions audit. So in other words, if you've got some directions that say do something and you're not doing that, that's where I have to start asking questions.
Look at it this way. The law, on the left, sees a violation. The certificate is expired. End of story. But the auditor, on the right, sees that expired certificate as just a symptom of a bigger problem. They're not asking, is this illegal? They're asking, why did your internal process, your management system, fail to catch this? Why did it let this happen? The expired ticket isn't the problem, it's the proof of the problem. And this right here is what they're hunting for. This is what a non-conformance looks like. A management system failure. In simple terms, it just means you failed to prove you have a working process for knowing what you're supposed to do, for tracking it, and for keeping the receipts to show you're doing it.
Is it true that I've derived a revenue stream from management failure? Yes, that is. I've derived a revenue stream from human failure. It's a golden era for me.
That's what they can write you up for. And check out this quote. It says it all. The non-conformance would be against the system, not the statute. An auditor is not a cop. They're a system analyst. Their report will never say you broke Georgia code. It's going to say your system failed to ensure you complied with Georgia code. It's a small difference in words, but a massive difference in thinking. Okay, so where does this whole system versus statute thing actually pop up on the factory floor? Let's walk through 4 really common blind spots where even the sharpest teams can get tripped up.
All right, first up, the classic, boilers and pressure vessels. I mean, these are everywhere in Georgia's manufacturing plants. They're so common, you probably walk past them 10 times a day without even giving them a second thought.
Actually, in the case of boilers, as I was saying earlier, that's not true. They're in the bottom of the place. It's a nasty environment, noisy. A lot of times there's grease and all that kind of thing around, and nobody walks by them, and they're there for a reason, for that very reason. So you have to go to some effort sometime to check it out.
They just become part of the background.
And that right there is the danger. A lot of the time, management isn't even 100% sure if a specific vessel even falls under the state inspection rules. Your system's very first job is to identify the risk. Before you can track compliance, you got to know what to track in the first place. Not knowing is a massive failure of your system from the get-go.
Most of the places I go are big enough and sophisticated enough to know that. And they've also been audited by the insurance company and audited by the fire department or whatever their local zoning authority, whatever that may be. So it's not necessarily true that people are in the dark about the requirement for maintaining the certificate on the vessel. What is in the dark is how they do it, how often they do it, and where they keep the records.
Is exactly why an auditor is going to come in and immediately start asking these kinds of process questions. They want to see your method. How do you figure out what's regulated? Show me the schedule. Who's in charge of tracking renewals? Where's the paper trail? They're auditing your playbook, not just looking for a sticker on a tank.
Oh, what I'm also going to do is ask the question, when's the last time it flunked inspection, and what did you do about it? Because I want you to take action when that happens.
Okay, let's move on to example number 2. Overhead cranes.
Oh, by the way, the biggest overhead crane I ever saw was in a place where the building itself was built in 1910, and the cornerstone was set by Thomas Edison. And the crane itself is so big that it's able to pick up a railroad locomotive and fly it through the air. It's cool to be around something that big.
Now, these are a bit different. Unlike boilers, which are often state regulated, cranes usually fall under federal OSHA rules. But for an auditor, the thinking is exactly the same. And man, this is a huge trap so many people fall into. It's this assumption that because the crane is lifting stuff every day, because it still works, it must be compliant. But OSHA doesn't just care that it works, it cares that you have a documented process for inspecting and maintaining it.
Yeah, the first thing I'm going to do when I see an overhead crane is talk to the nearest employee. I'm going to ask that employee, how do you know that crane is functional? How do you know it works? If they come back and say, it's not my job to do that crane. I don't know anything about the crane. I'm not trained as a crane operator. I'm going to respect that because not everybody's been trained as a crane operator. But then I'm going to find the crane operator. I'm going to ask that simple question: how do you know this thing is working today? And they're going to say something like they inspect it, and whoever they is, we're going to try to find them too, and then the search is on.
And surprise, surprise, the auditor's questions are going to sound pretty familiar, right? They're looking for the program, the documentation, the system that proves you're managing that crane's safety proactively, not just reacting when it breaks down. The problem is rarely the crane itself, it's the lack of a structured, written down process for overseeing it. Our third example is elevators. These are obviously regulated here in Georgia, but they have their own special kind of blind spot. They're almost always maintained by an outside vendor. And this leads to what is, honestly, one of the most dangerous assumptions a manager can make. Oh, the elevator company handles that.
This also goes for a lot of production equipment in this day and age. The big CNC machines, the laser cutters, and a lot of equipment like that is calibrated by some outside entity. So when I go up to a production employee and ask a simple question, when's the last time this thing was calibrated? A lot of them have no idea because that information is kept elsewhere, and I have to go to extra work in order to try to find that.
From a management system perspective, that's just not good enough. Your system is ultimately on the hook for controlling every process that affects your compliance, even the ones you've outsourced. So the auditor is going to want to see how you manage your vendor. Where's your proof? Do you get copies of their inspection reports? Do you actually track the renewal dates yourself? What's your process for making sure the problems they find actually get fixed? If your only answer is, we just trust them, you have no objective evidence of control. That's a weak process, not a strong system.
And invariably, I'll go to the maintenance guy's office and there'll be a big stack of papers on the corner of the desk. And I'll say, "What happened to your most recent equipment calibration from that outsourcing entity, whatever that was?" And then they'll rifle through the big pile of papers and maybe or maybe not come up with it. A lot of the modern ones have computerized maintenance management, CMMC situations, and it's a little bit better, but you still have to go to a proactive effort to scan that certificate, put it in the system. And a lot of those guys aren't too system oriented, unfortunately.
All right, our last example, and this is one that gets overlooked all the time: dock locks, or those truck restraint systems. Now, these might not have a specific Georgia inspection rule like a boiler does, but they are absolutely part of your general safety obligations under OSHA. This quote just nails it. The auditor is basically saying, look, I know there isn't a specific law for this thing.
The auditor will say, there may or may not be a specific law, because I think in Georgia there actually is a law. And I'm pretty sure in South Carolina there's a law, and there are definitely laws elsewhere. The point being that it's not more not about the law than it is you're taking responsibility for keeping your forklift operators and your pickers and putter awayers, those people, safe.
But they can and they will cite your system for failing to identify and manage the risks for what is clearly a piece of safety critical equipment. It is a perfect textbook example of a management system failure. So you've seen all these examples, right? What's the common thread? What's the real problem at the heart of all this? It's usually not about people not knowing the law. It's about something much more human. And it happens in every organization. It's an ownership problem. I mean, this story plays out in facilities all over the country, every single day. The maintenance team thinks the safety department has it covered. Safety assumes engineering is on it. Engineering figures it must be facilities' job.
There's a square missing on this thing, which is the employee. Down here someplace there's an operator. And at some point in the day, the operator is the most equipment-facing person in the operation, and also the person most likely to get hurt if there's some kind of problem. So if there's not operator awareness, it doesn't kick in any of these systems in the same level of effectiveness.
Everybody thinks somebody else is responsible, which means, in the end, nobody is. And the result? A gap, a missed inspection, a failure that was totally foreseeable. But here's the good news. This is a completely solvable problem. It's not about working harder or throwing more people at it. It's about working smarter. It's about building a system that is clear, documented, and totally defensible when that auditor walks in the door. So here it is, your 5-step action plan. Step 1, register. Make one master list of all your regulated equipment. Get it all in one place so nothing gets forgotten. Step 2, and this is the big one, assign. Give every single item on that list a specific owner. No confusion. This kills the ownership problem. 3, define the inspection frequency for everything. 4, retain the proof. Keep that objective evidence. And finally, step 5, verify. Use your own internal audits to test your system and make sure it's actually working like it should.
I have something to say on this too. If your equipment inspection program turns up something, by all means fix it. That is to say, there's a weak link on here is actually fixing the system. You have to devote resources to it, and if you find out there's an issue, you have to take care of it. One of the many things I'm going to ask when I am probing into this is, when's the last time it broke? And if so, when did you fix it, and where's the receipt for that? Because the actual requirement isn't just for inspection, although there is an inspection requirement. What I'm really interested in is whether or not you take care of your equipment.
Good. So as we wrap this up, I want to leave you with one last thought. All of this stuff, the boilers, the cranes, the elevators, none of it is exotic or some weird, unusual risk. It's the everyday fabric of your facility. And you know what? That's exactly what makes it so dangerous. And if there's one thing to remember from all this, it's this quote right here. Common risks become background noise. The things you see every single day are the easiest things in the world to start ignoring. They just blend into the background until something goes wrong.
There's another thing on this, which is nothing happens in isolation. If I go to a place where there's a lot of maintenance issues, nobody keeps track of any records, there's no kind of record keeping that says when things are done, and lack of awareness on the behalf of the employee as to whether or not there's some dangerous piece of equipment that needs to be worked on. But that mentality spreads throughout the organization. The same thing could be said for quality, same thing could be said for ethics and integrity and financial being solid and all that stuff. In other words, very often people with weak programs of inspection like this are weak elsewhere.
A strong management system is designed to fight that human nature, to pull those common risks right back into the spotlight where they belong. So, the next time you're walking through your facility, don't just ask yourself if a certificate is up to date. Ask a better question. Ask the question an auditor would ask. Is our system actually built to prevent the foreseeable? Because at the end of the day, that's what they're really there to find out.
All right, thanks, Notebook. That was actually not terrible, and but it did lack the whole idea of employee involvement and about fixing the problem if you find out one. If you want me to come in and you want me to come and have me give wisdom in person, I'll be happy to do that. Click the link at the bottom of the thing here. You know where to find me. Thanks for watching all this. We'll talk to you later.